Sifter for the ear.
News, interviews, reviews, cinema, TV, streaming. Action!
Hi y'all, this is Jerry Williams, aka TV Jerry. The Ashland Theater is hosting a movie trivia night fundraiser on Sunday, March 15th at 6 p.m. Tickets are $25 a person and will directly support the Ashland Theater Foundation's mission to maintain the historic theater and expand community programming. I'll have a link on the webpage for this show at TV Jerry. Just be sure you get home in time for the Oscars. What you're listening to is the opening music for FUTUROPOLIS, which was co-directed by today's guests, Phil Trumbo and Steve Segal. They're Richmond artist animators who graduated from VCU and created this zany animated sci-fi adventure in 1984. They soon departed for careers on the West Coast. Steve went to work at Pixar on the first two Toy Stories, and Phil won an Emmy for his work on Pee-wee's Playhouse. FUTUROPOLIS is being shown as part of the 32nd Annual James River Film Festival, which runs from March 29th through April 4th. On this show, Phil and Steve will talk about the making of FUTUROPOLIS, and I'll have both of them back in the near future to separately talk about their careers after FUTUROPOLIS.
Sifter Review of the Week.
56 Days on Prime Video. Dove Cameron and Evangelia play a couple who meet cute at a grocery store and dive immediately into a hot affair. Jump forward to today, where there's a corpse decomposing in his bathtub. That's the basic plot behind this series, jumping back and forth as it counts the days up to the body's discovery. Those scenes involve a cop duo trying to solve the mystery of who's actually dead. Of course, there's shocking revelations along the way. Fortunately, the duo's chemistry works. Cameron is slyly seductive and devious, while Jogia plays it more serious, with continually disheveled hair adding an element of entitled nonchalance. What doesn't work is the bane of so many current series. There's too much extra padding that slows the pace. The revelations deepen the impact, but it takes too long with no suspense to get to the final outcome. I gave 56 Days 2 out of 5 stars.
Hey, Steve. Great to see you, man.
Hey, Phil. How you doing?
Steve and Phil, let's talk about FUTUROPOLIS, which is why we're here today. What was the initial inspiration for this crazy concept?
I'll just go first, and Steve can correct me. Steve and I were students at VCU in a film class together. We'd known each other before because Steve was the dude that had all the great animation. He would literally go out and secretly acquire, shall we say, classic animation, because there was no animation classes or anything at that point at VCU or anywhere around. And so Steve was this repository. He would do birthday parties to finance his habit and show all these great classic cartoons. The kid had no idea what they were. When we were in a film class together, naturally we kind of worked together on this very silly film called Monster. It was pixelated. It's got a lot of live action luminaries and stuff in it. And when we graduated, Steve quite wisely went out and tried to get a job with it. And I think you went to Mr. Moe's sub shop and pitched it and got us our first TV commercial. Is that how it works, Steve?
Well, essentially, I don't remember being that proactive. Maybe once I graduated, I had made some other films and won some prizes and stuff. I think Quig Lawrence had said, "Why don't you join us?"
Footnote.
Quig Lawrence was a marketing person and producer at Alpha Audio Recording Studios. Steve and Phil formed Candy Apple Animation there in 1972 and made animated commercials which helped finance FUTUROPOLIS.
And then I think they went out and they found the agency that wanted to do the Mr. Moe.
Just to clarify, Steve, when he says your habit, that means to animate. That does not mean for heroin or anything cool, right?
What's the difference?
Yeah.
And I used to bring a Super 8 camera into the movie theater and record or rent films from like Films Incorporated, and then had a little mirror box that would rear project it, and I'd make my own copies. And he's right. I would show him at birthday parties, and I would get money for that. And then it's interesting because my son is doing that, not the exact same thing, but he's a magician, and he goes out and he does birthday parties.
Oh, cool.
But coming back to FUTUROPOLIS for a second, so basically we made this crazy film, this crazy monster film that sort of said to be continued. And Steve and I went, gee, we should make a sci-fi sequel to this. So I think the initial idea of Futuropolis was a sequel to our student film. As Steve said, he was making independent, highly awarded films. I made my first independent drawn animated film and got in the New York Film Festival or something. So we were doing stuff, but I think the genesis of it was, let's do something else cool. We both graduated with bachelor's degrees. We looked upon Futuropolis as kind of like our master's thesis, because we knew one day we'd have to get a real job. So basically, Futuropolis was us putting in everything we wanted to do, we wanted to try out, things that were like homages and stuff. Is that fair, Steve?
Oh, yeah. I think when we were working on Monster, we would say, oh, didn't you love that scene in Forbidden Planet? And oh, wasn't that great in The Time Machine? Yeah, I wish we could do that. Well, yeah, why don't we?
And it's interesting because I watched it, of course, originally in the 80s, but I watched it again a couple nights ago, which was still lots of fun. And after it was over, I'm like, okay, this is obviously very clearly a demo for these guys, because it starts out with the rotoscoping, but by the end, you've got all these other crazy animated styles too. So you're right, it was a master thesis. It was your demo, which I'm assuming got y'all plenty of work after that.
Steve, I think you got your Disney gig because they went, if this guy will do this, he'll do anything.
Well, I never worked for Disney. I was Disney adjacent. My first theatrical feature was The Brave Little Toaster.
Footnote.
The Brave Little Toaster was an animated film in 1987, and Jerry Reese was the director.
And it had been developed at Disney, and then Disney canceled it, and the people who were working on it said, this is pretty good. They went off and made it on their own. And Jerry Reese had seen Futuropolis at a film festival and knew that it was made on a shoestring, and they were going to make their film on a shoestring because they didn't have Disney money anymore. So they said, well, if they could do that, he could probably operate the cameras in Taiwan, because they had to move to Taiwan to make Brave Little Toaster.
Surprise guest drop-in.
Well, I want to ask you more about it. I've got lots of questions, but as I often do, I have a surprise drop-in guest who I'm sure you'll recognize as soon as you see the name or his face, who was also a little bit involved in Futuropolis.
Probably Cosmo.
It is Cosmo. There you go.
Hey, Tom.
Hey,
Footnote.
Tom Campanelli is a longtime Richmonder who served on the staff of the Biograph Theater and continues to contribute to Richmond's art and music scene. Tom, you were in the movie,
yes.
And the reason you're on today, we're going to ask you about the movie, but you're also here because you got this idea to have it at the James Everett Film Festival, and you're involved in the festival forever, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, 32 years.
Wow. So how did you decide on let's put Futuropolis in the festival?
Well, this is actually the third time it's been in.
Really? Okay.
The first time was in 1995, and then 2003, and then this will be the third time, 2006.
It's in our contract. Every 10 years, they have to
Every
show
10. That's right. That's right.
Before I ask you about your experience in Futuropolis, give us a little bit of background. What's happening on the festival this year that might be new or unique?
There's a bunch of stuff. It's a week long, March 29th to April 4th. Futuropolis will be on the 4th, the last day of the festival. The venues are going to be kind of all over. It'll be at the Gray Street Theater, which is part of VCU Dance, the Richmond Public Library, Studio 2-3, and the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. Like the first day, some of the VCU students are going to be showing some of their short films. And then Charles Burnett's film is its 50th anniversary of The Killer of Sheep. He's an African-American filmmaker of a lot of note. And then there's going to be some George Millet films with a magician in attendance.
Footnote.
Georges Méliès was the French illusionist and filmmaker who pioneered narrative and special effects in film between 1896 and 1913.
This is going to be a live performance of the magician Dan Dalton, and James Parrish is going to be showing some slides from the Millet Museum in Paris, so he must have gone in the last year or so.
Oh, cool.
So that's pretty interesting. Flickr, which was an organization that ran films here in Richmond for a while. James Parrish ran that, and a bunch of films that had been on Flickr are going to be shown. Well, there's going to be a documentary. They're going to show the 2014 film called The Lost Colony, which was having to do with the Roanoke Island thing down in the Outer Banks.
A whole bunch of stuff. So, Phil and Steve, how did you rope Tom into being in Futuropolis?
Yeah, I'd like to remember. We could go over that again.
Everybody else turned us down.
Is that what you remember, really? Or did y'all say he's the perfect guy for that?
He was fantastic to work with. He was always there. I mean, everybody worked really hard and for no money. I mean, for pizza. And he stayed from the very beginning all the way to the end.
Phil,
Yeah.
anything you want to add to the discussion about Tom before we let him go?
It was the pizza. Well, Tom was part of this creative group that I was involved in. I was in the band The Orthotonics, had his Tom and Marty band. So we were part of this sort of collaborative, eccentric Richmond community, I think. And there was a lot of like, oh, I'll work on your project, you work on mine, I'll do something for you, I'll do something for yours. That wonderful collaborative air that I think probably still exists to a degree. I think Tom and all the other folks as well, too, kind of had VCU fan-centric, was location-based. But more than that, I think it was this kind of inventive DIY kind of boho culture that we were all participating in.
I remember the first performance of the Tom and Marty band. It was at band camp, the notorious band camp, and I was tripping out of my mind. And I'm like, what is this crazy band, these two weirdos? Anyway, those were the good old days, but we'll skip that. So, Tom, what do you remember most about the movie, or what was the thing that was the most fun for you or the biggest challenge for you?
Part of the thing was that since I was working at the Biograph Theater, I was free during the week, during the days. And a lot of times we would film for 2 or 3 weeks in a row or weekends in a row. And then there'd be a break of a couple months while Phil and Steve prepared sets or wrote or did something or went out and actually worked someplace else so that they could make some money to put it into the film. But it was always they'd get a phone call going, okay, we're going to be filming for the next 3 weeks. Are you ready? And I said, yeah, let's do it. It was a lot of fun.
I don't think it's breaking news, but I'm actually going to be at the James River Festival in person.
Yeah, so that is pretty exciting. Yeah.
All right, Tom, thank you so much. Good to see you as always.
All right, sure. It's good to see everybody.
Look forward to seeing you in Richmond.
Wish I was there.
Bye-bye.
So let me ask y'all, because of course, watching the film again, I noticed Red Grooms was kind of a big inspiration for that. Max Fleischer, the style of him and the rotoscoping. I know that y'all used some rotoscoping in the film on top of the people, but the people also look kind of animated. What is the process that you did to give us that kind of stop motion kind of feel for the people?
Take it, Steve.
Yeah, we used 2 different techniques. And yeah, you're right about Red Grooms. And that was really the genesis of Monster.
Uh-huh.
In fact, Cliff Dixon, I think, was the film teacher. And he said, you guys are going to do group projects. And I was interested in one that was going to be cell animated. But then I heard, probably Phil told me that we're going to do this in the style of Fat Feet by Red Grooms. And I went, oh, well, I want to do that.
Footnote.
Red Grooms is a multimedia artist best known for his colorful pop art constructions, and Max Fleischer was a pioneer in animated cartoons, known for Betty Boop and Popeye.
Then we were just, dressing up people in sort of cartoony costumes and clicking the camera by hand, just click, 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 click. And if we had dialogue scenes, we had pre-recorded them at Alpha Audio, and then we would play it back at half speed and run the camera at half speed. So it has a little bit of a jerky quality. The fight scene at the end primarily is rotoscope, and we just filmed it at normal speed. And then I traced it all, very much in the Fleischer style.
Right, and that's something that people nowadays probably don't even realize. When they see those globs and all, and even some of the other stuff, you actually hand painted that on every cell. That was not some kind of CGI. That they didn't have CGI back then.
Well, even more than that. The blobs were actually painted on 16 millimeter films of frame.
Oh, right. I said cell. I meant film frame.
Steve literally, he used to do it on 8 millimeter film. And he still has his vision. It's amazing. He would literally animate this stuff on these 16 millimeter canvas, if you will. The process he's talking about of shooting is called pixelization. And I think Norman McLaren, wasn't it, the Canadian Film Board, really kind of pioneered that. And so as Steve says, it's clicking, but it's clicking with sensitivity. Like the fewer times you click, the jerkier it is. The more times you click, the smoother it is. And Steve really has this intuitive sense of animation, drawn animation and drawing on film. And then he brings that to the camera, the Bolex camera, and he's clicking it with kind of an intuition in and out and speeding up and stuff. So it's not just a technique. It's not just a method,
And when you say clicking, just for the listener, that means actually stopping the camera and then starting the camera. So you're essentially taking a bunch of still frames in a film camera.
Right.
Got it.
I remember the scene where Cassandra's hitting Mike on the head with the mirror, and I wanted a really cartoony like 2 frames for the action. And so as she was bringing the mirror up, I was taking a bunch of clicks. And as she dropped it down, I started slowing down so that it would be a much faster action. But she heard the clicks and she slowed down her action. So the slower I clicked, the slower she moved. I couldn't get what I wanted.
I forgot to mention when Tom was on, the poster for this year's James River Film Festival was done by Carrie Aldo, who's in the movie, who was in Futuropolis, right?
Yep, it's gorgeous. I just sent it to a friend, as a matter of fact.
So since you were both listed as co-directors, how did that work out? I mean, you talked some about the animation versus the live action. Was there a delineation, or did y'all kind of co-direct everything, or how did that whole process work?
Well, we just kind of went at it. In general terms, Steve had the camera, he had the technology, and was really more the cinematographer. I think that's fair, isn't it, Steve?
Yes.
He actually had that. He had the animation stand, and I was a hippie who could draw pretty good in general, but we traded back and forth on things, you know?
So you mentioned the fact that you recorded all the voiceover originally, and then they dubbed it. And I'm assuming because a lot of the movements and the gestures are very deliberate and big, and the voiceover is obviously not 100% matched. I'm assuming some of that was kind of intentional to kind of have that little funkiness to the whole thing.
Oh, we couldn't control it. But to be clear, a lot of the action was just shot first, and then the actors dubbed afterwards. When we had lip sync scenes like Steve's talking about, the half speed, when we really would have, Egghead or someone doing an exposition, or Tom, then we'd record it first. So it kind of worked both ways, I think, didn't it, Steve?
That's right. Yeah. Which is kind of like the way they did Popeye. They would do some lip sync stuff, and then they would let Jack Mercer do some improvised stuff after they had animated it.
I made a comment when I was watching it, and I didn't check to look up the date. 1984, were there even video games yet?
There were basic video games.
Like Pong and stuff? Because obviously the fight scenes especially feel like a modern video game. That didn't inspire y'all because that wasn't around yet.
Yeah, we were probably more inspired by Popeye. A lot of those have fight scenes.
Well, and honestly, computer graphics, we were kind of making fun of computer graphics. There's one where there's a, quote, CG-looking screen that we made it kind of look cheesier on purpose, right? With graphs and low-res stuff. Because, the only computer in this was Steve's Commodore C64, which I think was just used for the end title credits, wasn't it, Steve?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah. There's the end credits are actually animated, are computer animation. And it's a program Kermit Woodall and I wrote, and it moves the type around.
Of course, the first part of the movie is pretty much straightforward science fiction story. And then it goes into trip sequences. And then we get into all the locations, the Branch Museum, the rocks on the river, the Hollywood Cemetery. What was the inspiration for going out and shooting in all these other places? Was that just to expand the film, or did you want to try different styles with that?
I don't remember. Do you, Steve?
Well, yeah, I think because we're, just like we were inspired by science fiction films, we were film nerds in general. And we were just looking for an excuse to parody all different kinds of films.
I think that was it.
So, we got like a Dracula sequence and we got a Western, and it gave us a good excuse to just, make a miniature Western.
You're right. It was to explore these genres. And luckily, Richmond is full of these sets. We didn't ask permission. We would just show up and do stuff on all these things. Hey, boys, come on, bring the camera. Let's jump on. It was kind of like Ed Wood or something, just sort of.
Yeah. And obviously, Steve, knowing your work before that, and I guess after that, the intermission sequence is pretty much your animation, right?
Yeah, the animation is mine. I think the look overall is Phil's. Like the intermission, that's all mine. There's a couple of other places. I think the fight scene would be a combination of both of our sensibilities.
What would you say the biggest challenge was on putting this together?
I mean, it was all fun. It was all a challenge. I remember having nightmares about, all the cells burning up in a house fire, or the sound mix was kind of a nightmare. I remember there were some real challenges. The film was too long for Commonwealth Films, so we had to go up to Washington, D.C. to do it.
Footnote.
Commonwealth Films was the local facility that processed film. It's no longer in operation.
And there was some miscommunication about the size of the reel they could handle. So we had to jerry-rig something, to make it so we could get our film on there. Does any of that ring a bell, Phil?
That was very stressful. I'd forgotten about that because we were out of our element. We were shooting on neg. You had to have it developed, look at your work print, and then editing it together. Also, we probably made the film exactly the wrong length. It was neither a short nor a feature or a featurette. And like Steve says, it fits on one gigantic reel, which is a great idea, except if you keep cranking that reel, it kind of abrades the film after a certain point. So it got made, we got out there. I actually wouldn't mind if we ran it through an AI cleaner. I know this is like a terrible thing for anyone to say, but I wouldn't mind saying, okay, boys, clean her up for us.
Yeah, yeah. Although they might try to smooth it out and make it look human, which of course would ruin the whole point.
No, I mean just like color correction and
Oh, okay,
that kind of
right,
stuff,
right.
resolution and that kind of stuff. But it is what it is, you know.
So what was the result of it once y'all were finished with it? I know that, Steve, you mentioned briefly that you got your gigs out of that. Did that send both of you off on the careers? Did it play at all anywhere other than Richmond?
Listen, we both become thousandaires as a result of it.
Thousandaires.
Not millionaires, we became thousandaires.
Oh, got it. Okay, right. Yeah, there we go.
It played a lot of places. It played at the Film Forum in New York, played at the Hirshhorn Museum. Expanded Entertainment, which had distributed some of my other films, they put together a package called Futuropolis and Timeless Tales of Fantasy.
Oh, wow.
And it was a theatrical package. I remember seeing it on the list of Variety, and I still don't know why I didn't buy that copy of Variety. I think I just didn't have any extra money at the time.
Yeah.
But it was on the very bottom of that week's grosses, and it had grossed, a few $1,000s, but enough to make it on the list.
I think it was distributed as a midnight show package nationally. I think Futuropolis was actually entered into the Academy Awards, but did not get any further than like filling out the paperwork for it as a short, animated short.
And to your point, it was probably too long for a short.
You got it exactly right. They identified a short as something under 30 minutes, and a feature is something over an hour. And there's obviously a gap in there.
47 minutes.
I actually lobbied the Academy to change it so there's no gap, and they did.
Oh, cool.
Now anything up to an hour is considered a short.
Oh, wow.
So today it would qualify, but at the time, actually a lot of film festivals said we can't even look at it. But I kind of understood when they explained, well, if we put it in a package show, it dominates. You can't have a collection of shorts and one of them's almost 40 minutes long.
It should dominate.
Exactly. World domination.
I was really frustrated that I couldn't get it in the festivals, and I was at SIGGRAPH.
Footnote.
SIGGRAPH is an annual conference based on computer graphics.
I didn't have any money, so I actually snuck into SIGGRAPH. The secret is you wait for the coffee break, and then you go in when the whole crowd goes in. A friend of mine said, hey, look, it says you can get a room and projector if you want to show your work. They didn't ask for any credentials. I got a room, I got a projector, I made some posters, I put them up around SIGGRAPH. I gave one to John Lasseter, who I never had met before, but I introduced myself. This is before people knew who he was.
Footnote.
John Lasseter was the leading force of Pixar animation, and he directed the first two Toy Stories, A Bug's Life, and the first two Cars.
And then ultimately, I think he remembered the film when I applied to work at Pixar.
Uh-huh. Well, now I'm going to get y'all both back on the show to talk about your individual careers, but I have one last question I want to ask you today. When you're not working on your own project or now teaching, as both of you do, what have you been watching lately? What have you seen in the movies or on streaming that's kind of interesting or fun?
There was a film made right here in the Bay Area that I liked very much, but nobody was talking about. It's called In Your Dreams. And a very talented young filmmaker named Alex Wu had a really fun student film. I think it was called Rex Steel Spy Smasher. Anyway, that's one that I would recommend. I'm not teaching anymore.
Oh, you're
I'm
not?
really
Okay.
fully retired.
Good for you. Phil, how about you? You see anything lately?
Gosh, I just look at a lot of stuff and kind of mine it. So I'm kind of looking at past projects, and then I've got a young adult fantasy project going as well. And I'm just kind of like looking at other folks' stuff, looking at influences. This sounds really corny, but I keep finding myself drawn back. You know who Charles Vess is? Charles Vess was a graduate of ECU. He's one of the top fantasy artists in the world. He lives in Roanoke. He did a illustrated novel with Neil Gaiman that won every award in the book called Stardust. It was made into a film called Stardust as well, a feature film. I keep getting drawn back into looking at Charles's stuff, and I've known him since the 70s. He was a contemporary of Steve and I. I keep looking at his work and just sort of going into that as well. I'm looking at dramatic series. The other thing, this is crazy, but Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, in terms of character and storytelling, and the fact that the creator of Breaking Bad, uncle, ran Richmond Bookshop, where I used to hang out on Broad Street. Vince Gilligan, his uncle is named Vince Gilligan. But I find myself just looking at like real character-driven stuff. I'm not really into meth or anything like that. It's kind of wide-ranging, bizarrely enough, Justified.
Great show, yeah.
Which is hardly like an artsy thing. I guess I'm just kind of fascinated by kind of cultural character storytelling and that kind of stuff.
All right, Steve and Phil, it's great to catch up. It's been a few decades since we've even talked to each other. Thanks so much again.
Love you, Steve.
Oh, love you too, Phil.
I love you both. Bye.
Bye-bye, guys.
That was Steve Segal and Phil Trumbo, who co-directed the zany animated sci-fi adventure Futuropolis in 1984. It's being shown as part of the 32nd Annual James River Film Festival, which runs from March 29th through April 4th. And I'll have a link to the show and more on the webpage for the show at TV Jerry. Since Steve went on to work at Pixar on the first two Toy Stories, and Phil won an Emmy for his work on Pee-wee's Playhouse, I'll have both of them back in the near future separately to talk about their careers after Futuropolis.
Coming soon. In theaters.
Hoppers. An animal lover uses technology to place her consciousness into a robotic beaver. The Bride. Jessie Buckley, who will probably win an Oscar for her performance in Hamnet, plays the title role. It's a combination Frankenstein story with Bonnie and Clyde in 30 Chicago. Christian Bale, Peter Sarsgaard, and Jake Gyllenhaal also star, directed by his sister, Maggie Gyllenhaal. Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man. This is a movie follow-up to the popular streaming series, still starring Cillian Murphy as he returns home and then becomes involved in secret wartime missions. Surat, this Oscar-nominated film for Best Foreign Language, is about a father and son who go looking for their missing daughter in North Africa. Youngblood. Ashton James plays a Detroit hockey prodigy who joins the Hamilton Mustangs. Heel. A 19-year-old criminal is kidnapped and forced into a rehabilitation process by a dysfunctional couple, starring Stephen Graham and Andrea Riseborough. For Worse. Amy Landecker plays a newly sober divorced mom who goes to a wedding with her much younger date. She also wrote and directed. Dolly. A young woman is abducted by a monstrous figure intent on raising her as a baby. Protector. Mila Jovovich plays a former war hero whose peaceful life is shattered when her daughter is kidnapped. Also with Matthew Modine and D.B. Sweeney. Aurora. What Happened to the Earth? This is a concert film featuring the Norwegian singer-songwriter. The Optimist. An eternally optimistic young woman gets visited by a cynical interrogator with violent habits.
TV and streaming.
Vladimir on Netflix. Rachel Weisz plays a professor who becomes preoccupied with a younger colleague, Leo Woodall. DTF St. Louis. On HBO, Justin Bateman and David Harbour star as work friends whose mission to spice up their sex lives leads one of them to an untimely death. Marshals on CBS and Paramount+. This spinoff from Taylor Sheridan takes up with Yellowstone's son, Casey Dutton, played by Luke Grimes in the title role. War Machine on Netflix. This takes place at a special ops boot camp where they encounter a deadly force from beyond this world. Ted on Peacock. A new season of this raunchy comedy series based on the movie. Next week, I'll be on vacation, but in 2 weeks, I'll be back to talk to the creators of the new Italian and French Film Festival. This is Jerry Williams. Thanks for listening.
For more Sister, including literally thousands of reviews,
Visit tvjerry.com.
That's a wrap.